It was one of those nights when the rain came down relentlessly, turning the city streets into streams of shimmering light. Neon signs bounced off puddles, car headlights glinted against wet asphalt, and umbrellas bobbed like tiny islands of color amid the gray. Most people were rushing home, heads down, absorbed in their own world, unaware of anything but their own schedules, their own lives, their own worries. He was one of them, in a way, just a man walking home after another long day at work, shoulders slumped from exhaustion, a mild ache in his back from standing all day. Life had been nothing if not routine. Wake up early, go to work, grind through tasks, come home, repeat. He didn't expect extraordinary events. He didn't expect drama, excitement, or miracles. He just expected ordinary, quiet nights. And this night, so far, was no exception. But then he saw her. A woman standing at the bus stop, a thin coat clinging to her, shaking from the cold and the rain. Her hair was damp, her hands clutching her bag as though it were a life raft, her eyes darting to the street as cars passed, oblivious to her presence. Most people would have passed by, wrapped in their own lives, too busy to notice. But he noticed. He felt it. Something about her vulnerability, the quiet desperation in her posture, tugged at him. He stopped. "Here," he said, pulling off his jacket and holding it out. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough for her to hear over the rain. "Take this." She looked at him, startled. Hesitation flickered across her face. Pride, or maybe distrust, warred with need. But the cold won. Slowly, reluctantly, she accepted the jacket. For a brief moment, neither spoke. He felt an odd sense of satisfaction, as if he had done something meaningful, but also a twinge of curiosity. Who was she? Where was she going alone on a night like this? But he didn't press. She nodded in thanks and smiled faintly. That smile, tiny as it was, felt genuine. And yet, in that ordinary moment, a storm was quietly brewing. He thought he was helping just another stranger. A simple act of kindness, nothing more. But life has a way of hiding extraordinary things behind ordinary gestures. The jacket, the rain, the brief exchange, it was all a seed, waiting to grow into something neither of them could have imagined. As he watched her, something strange happened. He realized he felt lighter, calmer, more alive, as though the act had awakened something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of connection to another human being. In a city full of strangers, it was rare to feel noticed, to feel needed in a small, meaningful way. And here, in the rain, that feeling had come unexpectedly. Meanwhile, she felt it too, but in a different way. The warmth of the coat was comforting, but it was more than that. There was an honesty in his gesture, a lack of expectation that startled her. She wasn't used to people acting without ulterior motives. Life as a CEO, as someone constantly surrounded by ambition and calculation, had taught her to be cautious, to distrust gestures of goodwill, to always assume there was a catch. But here, in the rain, someone had given her something simply because he could. For a few seconds, they existed in a bubble of normality amid the chaos of the city. The bus hadn't arrived yet, and for that brief stretch of time, they were just two people sharing a moment. She felt a warmth beyond the jacket, something that reminded her of what life used to feel like before ambition and responsibilities weighed her down. He, on the other hand, didn't yet know who she was. He had no idea she was a woman of influence, a CEO of a major company, someone whose decisions could impact hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. To him, she was simply a shivering woman in need. And that ignorance, ironically, made the gesture all the more genuine. He wondered fleetingly what her story might be. Was she a student, a young professional, someone running late from work? He didn't ask. He didn't pry. Sometimes curiosity had to be tempered with respect. He simply offered warmth and waited, content in the knowledge that he had done the right thing. And then the bus arrived. They boarded together, standing in silence, the city lights reflecting off wet windows. He stole a glance at her, noting the subtle signs of exhaustion in her posture, the faint tension in her jaw. She caught his gaze briefly and gave a polite, almost shy smile. That smile lingered in his mind as he made his way to a seat, a small, inexplicable feeling of anticipation settling in his chest. Little did he know, this night was far from ordinary. This small encounter would set in motion a chain of events neither of them could have anticipated. The jacket, the rain, the chance meeting, it was all part of a larger story, one that would test their perceptions, challenge their assumptions, and ultimately change the course of both their lives.
And as the bus moved through the city streets, carrying them through the rain and the darkness, neither of them realized that the ordinary had already begun to transform into something extraordinary. Sometimes life works in strange ways. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can be the beginning of something monumental. And sometimes the person standing before you, someone who seems ordinary or even invisible in the moment, is about to become the most important person in your life. He offered his jacket, not knowing that she was not just anyone, but a CEO, a woman with power, influence, and vision beyond his wildest imagination. And he certainly had no idea that this single act, this fleeting choice, would bring their paths together in ways that would leave both of them forever changed. As the city lights passed by, rain streaking the windows, the bus moved silently through the night. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, the universe quietly conspired to teach them both a lesson, that compassion, empathy, and human connection are the most powerful forces of all, capable of rewriting destinies with nothing more than a simple act of kindness. And so the night began, not with a storm, but with the smallest gesture of warmth that would soon ripple through their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The bus moved slowly through the rain-slicked streets, its tires splashing through puddles, its headlights cutting through the evening fog. He sat quietly, jacket slightly damped from the rain but comforting nonetheless, and glanced over at her. She was still adjusting the jacket around her shoulders, the fabric a little too big but perfectly warm. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, staring out the window at the city lights reflected in the wet streets. He didn't know her name. He didn't know anything about her life. In fact, if someone had asked him to describe her, he would have stumbled. All he knew was that she had accepted his jacket and that her presence had left an unexpected imprint on his mind. What if, he wondered, this moment meant more than it seemed? What if this brief chance encounter was meant to teach him something about life, about people, about himself?
It was easy to forget in the rush of daily life that ordinary moments can hold extraordinary significance. Most days, people are so focused on their own problems that they fail to notice what's happening around them, or what could happen because of them. But sometimes life whispers a lesson in the quietest, simplest ways. A smile, a kind word, or, in his case, a jacket offered without expectation. He found himself watching her carefully, curious about her thoughts. Did she always carry herself with this mixture of strength and vulnerability? Did she often walk alone at night, facing the cold, the rain, the indifference of the city? Or was this night unusual for her, just like it had seemed unusual for him to step out of his own routine to offer a simple gesture? Meanwhile, she was thinking about him in her own way. She noticed his careful attention, the way he hadn't turned away like so many others had. She noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the quiet thoughtfulness in his expression. For someone who had lived surrounded by power, influence, and constant scrutiny, there was something remarkable about this ordinary man, this stranger who acted without ambition, without expectation, without agenda. Meanwhile, she pondered her own circumstances. Life as a CEO had taught her lessons about control, about strategy, about power. She had learned to read people, to anticipate motives, to guard her heart. And yet, here was someone who had acted purely, without calculation, without expectation, without hidden intent. It was disarming. It was almost unsettling how rare that authenticity felt. She studied him silently, noting the simplicity of his actions, the lack of pretense, the quiet dignity that seemed to exist naturally. Most encounters in her world were transactional, conversations held for gain, gestures given for reciprocity, smiles exchanged to smooth business relations. But this was genuine. And not genuineness, small as it might have seemed to him, resonated deeply. For both of them, the night had become more than a rainy commute. It had become a mirror, reflecting not just the city lights and wet streets, but inner truths they seldom allowed themselves to confront. He saw in her a fragility that hinted at strength, and she saw in him a kindness that hinted at resilience. What if, they each wondered, moments like this were more than chance? What if the universe had a way of aligning paths, not through grandeur or spectacle, but through simple, meaningful gestures? Could a single act of empathy, an unremarkable choice in an ordinary night, carry consequences that neither of them could foresee?
The bus rumbled along, its interior warm and dry compared to the streets outside. People moved around them, absorbed in their own lives, yet the connection between them grew subtly, almost imperceptibly. Words were few, observations were silent, but the exchange of presence, the acknowledgement of each other's existence, created a tension that hinted at the extraordinary. He wondered about the power of human connection. How often do we ignore the people around us, dismiss the fleeting moments that might have meaning, and fail to act simply because life demands speed, efficiency, and detachment? How often do we forget that empathy, however small, can ripple far beyond the moment it occurs?
She, too, reflected on these questions. Perhaps this encounter was a reminder of the simplicity she had lost in the pursuit of ambition. Perhaps it was a reminder that human warmth could exist even in the midst of power, that kindness could manifest outside the walls of a boardroom, that genuine concern could be offered without strings attached. And still the central question hovered in the air. What comes next? Who will we become because of this? What doors might this small interaction open, quietly, subtly, without fanfare or announcement? Neither of them knew. Both felt it, both sensed it, but both also recognized that the answer would unfold in time. For him, the curiosity was thrilling yet intimidating. He had lived his life expecting routine, predictability, monotony. The sudden appearance of someone who stirred reflection, who challenged complacency with something as simple as a jacket, was unnerving, and yet it was also invigorating. For her, the curiosity was equally profound. She had encountered many people who were kind, yes, but kindness with purpose, kindness with expectation. This was different. There was no agenda, no calculation, no hidden motive. It was raw, sincere, and deeply affecting. Could a single night, a single act, alter the course of life so significantly? The bus continued, stopping and starting, carrying them both toward unknown destinations. The rain began to taper, leaving the streets slick but calm. And as the night progressed, both of them realized in quiet, unspoken ways that this meeting had significance that extended far beyond the immediate moment. What if the stranger before you was someone who would change your life? What if the person you helped, simply because it felt right, would be the one to open doors you never dreamed of? Life often hides its most profound lessons in the smallest gestures, and tonight that lesson had begun to unfold. They sat in thoughtful silence, each reflecting on the other, wondering, questioning, imagining. Questions about identity, fate, and human connections swirled in their minds. Who was she really? Who was he really? And more importantly, how would this ordinary night ripple into extraordinary outcomes neither could yet comprehend? The curiosity, the tension, the unanswered questions, all of it hung in the air like the lingering scent of rain on asphalt. And in that space, a story was beginning to take shape, quietly, invisibly, yet powerfully enough to change both of their lives forever. Days passed after that rainy night, and yet the memory lingered in both of their minds. For him, it was the faint warmth of her gratitude, the subtle curve of her smile when she accepted his jacket. For her, it was the genuine kindness he had offered without question, without motive, without expectation. Neither could shake the feeling that the encounter had significance beyond the ordinary. He found himself thinking about her during mundane moments, the walk to work, waiting in line at the coffee shop, the quiet moments before sleep. There was a pull he couldn't explain, a sense that this meeting was not merely chance. He reflected on his own life, wondering how it had become so routine, so predictable, so small. He worked diligently, paid his bills, kept his head down, and yet the monotony had left him craving connection, craving meaning. And here it was, manifested in the form of a stranger's brief glance and a fleeting gesture of kindness. For her, the realization was deeper, more unsettling. She had spent years building a life that others envied, filled with board meetings, high-stakes decisions, and carefully curated appearances. She had learned to anticipate motives, to guard her emotions, to navigate a world where power often disguised loneliness. And yet, in that one moment, she had encountered someone unguarded, someone authentic, someone whose actions carried no agenda. It was as if the storm outside had not only soaked her coat, but also washed away the layers of suspicion she had built around her heart. The next time they met, it was by chance, or so it seemed. The encounter felt deliberate, though neither admitted it. Perhaps it was fate, perhaps it was coincidence,
But when their paths crossed again, they paused, both recognizing the subtle magnetism that had been present from the beginning. The conversation started cautiously, polite small talk at first. "Hi," he said, a little self-conscious. She smiled, hesitant but genuine. "I wasn't expecting to see you." And so the dialogue began. Not about work, not about social status, not about obligations or responsibilities. They spoke about small things at first, the weather, the city, mundane details that somehow felt important. And in those details, they discovered fragments of each other's lives, hopes, disappointments, fears, and dreams.
He learned that she was not just a stranger, but a person of immense accomplishment. She carried the weight of responsibility, yet she was quietly introspective, aware of the human cost behind success. He felt an odd mixture of awe and comfort, admiration and empathy. The woman who had seemed untouchable in the first encounter was in reality human, vulnerable, and capable of connection in ways he had not imagined. She, on the other hand, was struck by his humility, his resilience, his ability to care without expectation. In a world where people often sought her influence for personal gain, he had offered something intangible yet invaluable, genuine concern. It was rare, almost shocking, and yet profoundly moving. She found herself reflecting on what had drawn her to him in that first moment, the instinctive act of kindness that had hinted at a depth of character she had longed to find but rarely encountered. As their meetings continued, the connection deepened. They began to share stories about past struggles, moments that had shaped them, and challenges that had left lasting impressions. He spoke of long days at work, of feeling unnoticed despite his efforts, of small victories that went uncelebrated. She spoke of the loneliness that accompanied her achievements, of the constant balancing act between responsibility and personal fulfillment, of the pressure to perform perfectly in every sphere of her life. Through these shared narratives, a remarkable understanding emerged. They saw each other not as a man and a CEO, not as social equals or power differentials, but as two human beings navigating the complexities of life. They discovered empathy in one another, an unspoken recognition of struggle, resilience, and authenticity. He began to notice subtle changes within himself. He became more attentive to the world, more patient with others, more aware of the significance of small gestures. The act of giving that jacket had awakened a dormant sense of purpose, a reminder that his choices, no matter how minor they seemed, could have profound effects. He understood now that kindness is not measured by grandeur, but by sincerity and timing. She too underwent transformation. The encounter reminded her that not all human interactions were transactions, that there existed a realm of connection untarnished by ambition or expectation. She rediscovered joy in simple gestures, in spontaneous acts, in interactions that did not serve a strategic purpose, but existed solely to affirm humanity. For the first time in years, she felt the warmth of genuine human reciprocity, a warmth that money, status, or power could never replicate. As the weeks turned into months, their bond solidified. They met intentionally, though they never labeled it. A coffee, a walk, a casual conversation at the park. Each interaction layered upon the last, creating a rich tapestry of shared understanding and emotional intimacy. The walls they had built around themselves, the defenses honed by experience and responsibility, began to crumble in the presence of authenticity and trust. He began to see her influence, not as a barrier or intimidating presence, but as an opportunity to grow. She offered guidance subtly, not as charity or superiority, but as insight drawn from lived experience. Her mentorship was gentle yet profound, providing perspectives he had never considered, challenging assumptions, and opening doors of thought and possibility. And she, in turn, found inspiration in him. His simplicity was a mirror reflecting what she had long forgotten, that life's value is measured not by accolades, but by the capacity to connect, to care, to affect others positively. In his presence, she remembered the importance of vulnerability, the courage it takes to act without expectation, and the beauty of uncalculated, genuine kindness. This period of discovery was not without challenges. Misunderstandings, miscommunications, and moments of doubt arose, testing the strength of their connection. Yet every obstacle reinforced the depth of their bond. They learned that trust is earned slowly, nurtured patiently, and strengthened by repeated evidence of character. They realized that meaningful relationships, whether professional or personal, are built on authenticity, empathy, and shared values rather than appearances or social standing. By the time they fully recognized the significance of their connection, both had undergone profound internal shifts. He was more confident, more aware of the potential within himself, and more attuned to the power of empathy. She was more grounded, more receptive to human connection, and more appreciative of life beyond the metrics of success. Together, they had discovered that ordinary moments, like a jacket on a rainy night, could catalyze extraordinary personal growth. And yet, there remained an unspoken question, hovering at the edge of consciousness. How far would this connection go? How would their lives intertwine? And what ultimate impact would this chance encounter have on the paths they were destined to walk? Neither could know at that moment, but both sensed that the trajectory of their lives had already shifted irrevocably. In retrospect, that small act, the jacket, the shivering figure, the silent acknowledgement of need, was the beginning of a journey neither of them anticipated. It was a revelation, a personal discovery, and a quiet awakening to the power of human kindness, empathy, and connection. They had seen in each other reflections of what they valued most, and in doing so, had discovered a new dimension of themselves. The jacket had been the catalyst, but the real transformation occurred within, in the way he began to approach life with renewed purpose, in the way she began to approach people with renewed trust, and in the way both of them realized that meaningful human connections are the most powerful, transformative forces of all. As weeks turned into months, the connection between them evolved from fleeting encounters to a meaningful presence in each other's lives. What had begun as a brief act of kindness, a jacket on a rainy night, had grown into something far more substantial, a bond built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. He began to see her not merely as the woman who had accepted his jacket, but as someone who carried extraordinary strength beneath her composed exterior. She was a CEO, a leader, someone whose influence shaped the lives of countless individuals. Yet, despite her accomplishments, she approached him with humility, never flaunting her status, never reminding him of her power. Instead, she treated him as an equal, valuing his thoughts, insights, and perspectives. For him, this was both inspiring and intimidating. He had spent years working diligently, yet he often felt invisible in the fast-moving world around him. Seeing someone of such influence treat him with respect and genuine curiosity was transformative. It made him question his assumptions about himself and the way he approached life. Perhaps he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. Perhaps small actions, small choices, could lead to meaningful opportunities. They began meeting more regularly, often in casual settings where titles and responsibilities did not matter. A quiet cafe, a local park, a bookstore tucked away in a corner of the city. Places where conversation flowed naturally and genuine connection could thrive without interruption. During these meetings, they shared stories of struggle and triumph, laughter and tears, failures and lessons learned. He spoke openly about his daily challenges, the monotony of his work, the frustrations of feeling overlooked, and the quiet yearning for purpose beyond survival. She listened, truly listened, offering guidance and perspective not from a position of authority, but from experience. She shared her own journey, recounting the pressures of leading a company, making decisions that impacted hundreds, and the loneliness that often accompanied success. In these exchanges, both discovered common ground, the desire for connection, authenticity, and meaning. One afternoon, as they walked through a quiet park, he paused, reflecting on the subtle ways their lives had begun to intersect. "I never thought something as simple as a jacket could lead to this," he admitted. She smiled, a mixture of amusement and understanding. "Neither did I, but that's how life works sometimes." It was in these moments that the transformation became evident. He began taking small steps to change his life, motivated not by pressure or obligation, but by inspiration and renewed self-belief. He approached his work with greater confidence, volunteered for challenges he had previously avoided, and sought opportunities to grow personally and professionally. She, in turn, experienced her own transformation. The act of connecting with someone outside her immediate circle reminded her of the value of empathy and authenticity. It rekindled a sense of purpose beyond corporate achievement. She realized that success, no matter how impressive, meant little if it lacked human connection. Through him, she remembered that leadership also involved fostering trust, understanding, and meaningful relationships. Their bond faced its first real challenge when a professional opportunity arose that could have placed them in direct conflict. He had applied for a position within a company she oversaw, unaware of the implications. When she discovered it, she faced a dilemma: intervene and risk influencing his career path, or step back and allow him to navigate it independently. Rather than imposing her authority, she chose subtle guidance. She offered advice without revealing her full influence, suggested strategies to navigate obstacles, and encouraged him to trust his instincts. In doing so, she reinforced his confidence and allowed him to grow without over-interference. The experience became a turning point, solidifying both trust and mutual respect. Over time, they began to see the impact of their interactions ripple outward. Colleagues, friends, and family noticed changes in him: greater confidence, improved communication, and a newfound sense of purpose. For her, interactions with her team became more empathetic and collaborative. Her awareness of human connection deepened, and she approached leadership with renewed perspective, recognizing the power of kindness, mentorship, and authentic engagement. A pivotal moment arrived when he faced a personal crisis, a family emergency that threatened to derail his progress. The weight of responsibility and worry was heavy, and he felt the familiar pull of self-doubt. She stepped in, not as a rescuer, but as a partner in problem-solving. Through practical guidance, emotional support, and unwavering confidence in his abilities, she helped him navigate the challenge with resilience and clarity. It was then that he realized the profound truth of their connection. This was no longer about a jacket or a chance encounter. It was about mutual transformation.
Each had inspired the other to grow, to see possibilities beyond the constraints of circumstance, to act with courage and compassion. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and the simple act of kindness had become the catalyst for lasting change. Their story began to attract subtle attention in their social circles. Colleagues remarked on the unusual camaraderie between a rising professional and a high-level executive. Friends noticed his confidence and her warmth. And while neither sought recognition, the shared journey became a testament to the transformative power of empathy, authenticity, and human connection. The transformation was not only internal, it manifested in tangible achievements, collaborations, and opportunities that neither could have anticipated. Projects that he had once believed were beyond his reach suddenly became attainable, guided by insight, mentorship, and a renewed belief in his own capabilities. She, in turn, leveraged her influence not for personal gain, but to facilitate growth, empower others, and create environments where potential could flourish. As months turned into a year, the bond between them solidified into a partnership defined by mutual respect, shared values, and deep understanding. They became each other's confidants, advisors, and allies, and while the world might have seen only the CEO and the ordinary man, they knew the truth. It was the humanity, the authenticity, and the quiet courage in one another that had forged an unbreakable connection. Looking back, they could both trace the transformation to that single rainy night. The jacket had been the spark, but it was their willingness to see, understand, and invest in one another that fueled the change. What had started as an act of kindness had blossomed into a journey of growth, empathy, and profound personal development. He had discovered confidence, purpose, and resilience. She had rediscovered humanity, trust, and the joy of authentic connection. And together, they had proven a universal truth, that the smallest gestures, when offered with sincerity, can ignite transformations far beyond their immediate scope. Through shared experiences, challenges overcome, and lessons learned, they had each become better versions of themselves. Their story was no longer about chance. It was about choice, action, and the enduring impact of human connection.
And yet, even as their transformation became evident, a deeper twist remained on the horizon, a revelation that would not only solidify the significance of their journey, but also reveal the full scope of the life-changing impact of a single act of kindness. The months of quiet growth, Subtle mentorship and shared moments had led them to a point neither could have anticipated. What had started as a rainy night encounter had evolved into a connection that shaped not only their emotional lives, but also their futures in profound ways. Yet, the final twist, the revelation that would redefine everything, had not yet occurred. He had been working tirelessly on a personal project, a dream he had kept private for years. It was a risk, a venture outside of his comfort zone, and one that could either bring success or failure. The stakes felt high, and the pressure weighed heavily on him. Despite the confidence he had developed over the past months, self-doubt lingered. Would he be able to navigate this new challenge? Could he trust himself to rise to the occasion? She had been aware of his journey from the beginning, though she never overtly influenced it. Her guidance had always been subtle, a whisper of insight rather than a directive. Yet, as he approached the decisive moment, she recognized that the time had come to step forward in a way that neither of them had yet experienced.
It happened on a seemingly ordinary morning. He arrived at a meeting expecting to pitch his idea to a panel of investors. Nerves twisted in his stomach, uncertainty clouding his confidence. And then she appeared, not as the stranger from the rainy night, not as the quiet companion, but as the CEO whose decisions had the power to shape the outcome of his project. The realization hit him slowly at first, then like a lightning strike. The woman who had accepted his jacket, who had shared laughs, insights, and guidance, was the very person who could open doors to opportunities he had only dreamed of. He had unknowingly built a relationship with someone whose influence extended far beyond personal connection. For a moment, he froze, overwhelmed by a mixture of shock, gratitude, and disbelief. This was the woman he had helped, not knowing her true identity. And now she had the power to change the trajectory of his life entirely. She looked at him, her eyes steady and warm, and smiled. "I've been following your progress," she said gently. "I know what you're capable of, and I want to support you, not because of obligation, but because I believe in you." Tears welled in his eyes, not from pity or expectation, but from the sheer magnitude of the moment. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a transaction. This was recognition, affirmation, and the culmination of a journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness. As the meeting progressed, her support became evident. She advocated for his project, offered critical insights, and opened doors that had previously seemed inaccessible. Yet at every step, she emphasized one thing: his agency, his choices, his talent. She did not take credit. She did not overshadow him. She amplified the person he had become through dedication, resilience, and integrity. In that room, he realized the full impact of their journey together. The jacket, the rainy night, the quiet conversations, they were more than memories. They were catalysts for transformation, lessons in empathy, mentorship, and human connection. The twist of fate, the revelation of her true identity, served as the ultimate affirmation that life often unfolds in ways we cannot predict, yet the outcomes are deeply intertwined with the choices we make and the kindness we show. Outside the meeting room, they reflected on everything that had led to this moment. She admitted that from the very beginning, she had been quietly observing, testing, and nurturing his potential.
Not because she sought to control his path, but because she recognized the rare combination of humility, intelligence, and integrity that he possessed. It was a lesson she had learned herself, that potential often lies hidden in the most unexpected places, waiting for recognition and opportunity. He, in turn, reflected on his own growth. He had started as a man offering a jacket to a stranger, unaware of her identity or influence. Along the way, he had gained confidence, perspective, and a deeper understanding of human relationships. He had learned that courage is not only about bold actions, but also about consistent, quiet choices that align with one's values. He realized that his willingness to act with kindness had set in motion a ripple effect that would shape both their lives in ways he could never have anticipated. The final revelation, the twist, was not merely about her status as a CEO. It was about the profound truth that human connection, empathy, and integrity have transformative power. Their journey illustrated that even the smallest gestures can ignite monumental change. It demonstrated that the ordinary, when combined with authenticity and intention,
can become extraordinary. Together, they looked back at their story, the jacket, the rain, the quiet conversations, the challenges faced and overcome, and understood the lessons it held. 1. Kindness matters. Even small gestures can have lasting consequences. One act of compassion can set a chain of events into motion that changes lives. 2. Authenticity wins. Genuine actions, untainted by expectation or self-interest, build trust and foster meaningful connections. 3. Human connection is transformative. The relationships we cultivate, rooted in empathy and understanding, can inspire personal growth and open unforeseen opportunities. 4. Potential often goes unseen. The people around us may hold untapped potential. Recognizing and nurturing it can lead to extraordinary outcomes. 5. Life is interconnected. Chance encounters are rarely meaningless. Moments that seem trivial may ripple outward in profound, unforeseen ways. In the weeks that followed, their relationship continued to evolve. He embraced new opportunities, confident in his abilities and the support he had earned through dedication and integrity. She applied the lessons learned from their connection to her leadership, fostering environments that valued empathy, collaboration, and authentic human engagement.
Together, they became living proof that the intersection of kindness, opportunity, and insight can create profound transformation. The story concluded not with grandeur or spectacle, but with quiet affirmation. Life, they realized, is shaped by the choices we make in ordinary moments. It is molded by our willingness to act with integrity, to see others with empathy, and to embrace opportunities that arise from connection rather than ambition alone. He had offered his jacket without knowing who she was. She had accepted it without revealing her identity. And through a series of choices grounded in kindness, authenticity, and courage, they had both changed, not only in what they achieved, but in who they had become. It is a story of hope, of transformation, and of the quiet power of human connection. It reminds us all that the smallest acts, offered without expectation, can create ripples that extend far beyond our imagination. And sometimes the people we meet in ordinary circumstances are the very ones who will transform our lives in extraordinary ways. And so, the rainy night that began as a fleeting, ordinary moment became the cornerstone of a life-altering journey. A simple gesture, an open heart, and a shared sense of humanity became the forces that shaped destiny. It was a lesson in empathy, resilience, and the profound truth that kindness is never wasted. It always returns, often in ways we could never have predicted.